Have you ever had that disconcerting experience of realizing that someone who once treated you cordially now seems to harbor a silent resentment toward you? That unsettling feeling that something has fundamentally changed, even though there's no direct confrontation, no word of accusation uttered. There's something deeply disturbing about this silent war that unfolds without formal declaration, this hostility that manifests itself only in small gestures, averted glances, invitations that fail to arrive. We try to mentally reconstruct our recent interactions, searching for the unintentional offense, the misinterpreted word, the precise moment when something snapped. This experience isn't just a passing social discomfort, but reflects fundamental questions about our nature as rational and social beings, questions that Kant explored in depth in his philosophy. Most people navigate these turbulent waters of interpersonal relationships without a proper philosophical compass, without understanding the principles that govern both the origin of these conflicts and their possible resolution. Kantian concepts of human dignity, respect, and rational autonomy may initially seem abstract and distant from these everyday situations, but they actually offer profound insights that can transform our understanding of these moments of social rupture. Many of us have experienced that feeling of inadequacy, that lack of clarity about how to proceed when we realize we've become the object of aversion without fully understanding why. I promise that by the end of this reflection, you will not only better understand why these silent wars arise, but also possess Kantian conceptual tools to navigate these situations with greater wisdom and moral integrity. This knowledge is not merely theoretical, but will fundamentally transform your experience of social relations, allowing you to respond to hidden hostilities in a way that preserves both your dignity and that of others. And perhaps most importantly, understanding the Kantian principles governing interpersonal respect can make an immediate difference in how you approach the inevitable social conflicts that arise in your life, allowing you to face them not as mere emotional disturbances, but as moral challenges that demand a response based on universal principles. Let's explore together how Kant's philosophy illuminates this silent war that we so often don't see coming. To properly understand why people can suddenly begin to hate us without apparent warning, we must first consider Kant's conception of human dignity and respect. In Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, Kant argues that every human being possesses intrinsic value, a dignity that cannot be replaced or negotiated. This dignity derives from our nature as rational beings, capable of moral autonomy, of giving ourselves laws through our reason. Respect, for Kant, is not a mere feeling of approval or admiration, but a practical recognition of the absolute value of humanity in each person. When someone begins to hate us silently, without direct confrontation, what is often at stake is a perception of disrespect, a sense that their dignity has been somehow violated or diminished by our actions. Perhaps we have unwittingly treated that person as a mere means to our ends, rather than as an end in themselves, thus violating the Kantian categorical imperative. Or perhaps we have, through words or actions, seemed to deny their capacity for rational self-determination, treating them as inferior or incapable. Even when we are unaware of having done so, the perception of such disrespect can be enough to arouse a deep-seated hostility that is rarely expressed openly, precisely because it is rooted in a wound to dignity that is difficult to articulate or confront directly. I'll pause here and ask you directly. How many times have you found yourself baffled by animosity that seems to have arisen out of nowhere, trying to understand what could have triggered such a significant change in how someone treats you? That feeling that there's a silent war going on, where hostilities are communicated only through small gestures, evasive glances, a sudden coldness where there was once warmth? You're not alone. Many of us carry this unease, this discomfort of feeling like we've become the target of resentment without fully understanding why. I'd love for you to share your experience in the comments. It could be something simple, like, "The hardest part of facing this silent war for me is situation." Your comment not only helps me create content more targeted to your real needs, but also creates a community where others, who may be facing the same challenges as you, can feel understood and less alone in their relational journey. It's through this honest exchange that we grow together. So, please, pause the video for a moment and share your experience. Your voice matters more than you might think. Another crucial aspect to understanding these silent wars is Kant's conception of the opacity of the human mind, both to others and to ourselves. In anthropology, from a pragmatic point of view, Kant observes that we can never have complete access to other people's motives and intentions, and even our own motives often remain opaque to us. This opacity creates fertile ground for misunderstandings and misinterpretations. We can wound someone's dignity without any intention, simply because we do not fully understand how our words or actions are interpreted by them. And conversely, we can interpret others' actions as disrespectful or hostile when no offense was intended. This opacity is further complicated by the fact that, as Kant argues in his doctrine of virtue, we have a natural tendency to judge others more harshly than ourselves, to attribute bad intentions to their actions while finding excuses for our own moral failings. This asymmetry in moral judgment often leads to a spiral of mutual resentment, where each party sees itself as the victim of injustice and the other as the perpetrator, without there being clear communication that could resolve the misunderstanding. The situation is further complicated by what Kant identifies as our unsociable sociability, our simultaneous tendency to seek the company of others and to want to impose our will on them. In The Idea of a Universal History with a Cosmopolitan Purpose, Kant observes that human beings are naturally inclined to both sociability and antagonism, both to form bonds with others and to compete with them for status, recognition, and power. This inherent tension in human relationships means that even the most harmonious friendships and associations contain seeds of potential conflict. When someone suddenly begins to hate us, it is often because this latent tension has risen to the surface, perhaps due to a change in our relative status, a competition for some valued resource, or a divergence in goals or values that previously remained hidden or irrelevant. The silent war we experience is often a manifestation of this unsociable sociability, an expression of the contradictory forces of attraction and repulsion that characterize all human associations. Kant also offers us insights into why these hostilities often remain undeclared, why the war we experience is silent rather than open. In his discussion of the virtue of sincerity and the doctrine of virtue, Kant distinguishes between truthfulness, the duty not to lie when we speak, and frankness, the willingness to communicate our thoughts and feelings openly. While truthfulness is a perfect duty, which admits of no exceptions, Frankness is an imperfect duty, which allows latitude in its application. We recognize that not all our thoughts and feelings must be communicated at all times, that there is legitimate room for reserve and discretion in human relationships. This distinction explains why someone might choose not to directly express their hostility or resentment toward us. They may consider such expression to be imprudent, socially disruptive, or potentially damaging to common interests. They may fear retaliation, social judgment, or simply the intensification of conflict. Or they may be unsure about the legitimacy of their own feelings, hesitant to articulate a resentment that seems only partially justified or based on incomplete evidence. However, Kant would also argue that this silence, while understandable and even justifiable in certain contexts, presents its own moral challenges. In the doctrine of virtue, he discusses the importance of moral friendship, characterized by mutual trust and openness. In such a friendship, each person can communicate completely with the other, fully reveal their feelings to the other, without fear of judgment or betrayal. This ideal vision of friendship suggests that, while reserve is sometimes necessary, open and honest communication is essential to truly ethical relationships. When someone harbors their resentment in silence, without giving us the opportunity to explain our intentions or make amends for any unintended harm, they deny us the possibility of a full moral relationship. At the same time, when we perceive such silent resentment and do not seek to address it directly, perhaps we are equally failing in our duty to cultivate relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. This tension between legitimate reserve and the need for honest communication points to an even deeper aspect of the silent war, the role of pride and self-love. In anthropology, Kant identifies self-love as a natural inclination that, when not properly regulated by reason, can turn into arrogance or vanity. This excessive self-love makes us extremely sensitive to any perception of disrespect or diminishment, predisposing us both to be easily offended and to hesitate to acknowledge when we have offended others. When someone begins to silently hate us, often both their silence and our discomfort with the situation are fueled by pride. They may be reluctant to express their hurt for fear of appearing vulnerable or irrationally sensitive, while we may avoid directly addressing the tension for fear of confirmation of our guilt or rejection of our explanations. This impasse, fueled by pride on both sides, allows the silent war to drag on indefinitely, each side waiting for the other to take the first step toward reconciliation. But if pride is part of the problem, what would Kant suggest as a solution? Here, his concept of moral autonomy offers valuable guidance. In the groundwork, Kant argues that true autonomy consists in acting according to principles that we could rationally will as universal laws, regardless of our inclinations or particular interests. This conception of autonomy invites us to transcend the immediate emotional reactions to silent war, the hurt, the indignation, the desire for retaliation, and to consider the situation from a perspective of universality. What principle of action could we rationally want everyone to adopt in similar situations? Certainly not one that perpetuates misunderstandings and resentments out of pride or fear. Kantian autonomy invites us to be proactive in seeking clarity and reconciliation, not out of self-interest, but out of respect for the dignity of all parties involved and the value of the moral community. This doesn't mean we should always directly confront those who seem to have begun to hate us. Such confrontation can sometimes be unwise or even counterproductive, depending on the specific context and relationship in question. But the Kantian perspective invites us to critically reflect on our own actions and to be open to the possibility that we may have, even unintentionally, disrespected the dignity of others. It invites us to consider how we might repair any harm caused and restore a relationship based on mutual respect. And it encourages us to approach the other not as an adversary in a silent war, but as a potential partner in a joint project of building a moral community. This Kantian approach to silent warfare involves several concrete practices. First, honest self-examination. When we notice that someone seems to have begun to hate us, we must critically examine our own actions, seeking to identify any way in which we may have, even unintentionally, disrespected their dignity or autonomy. This examination should be guided not by fear or pride, but by a sincere commitment to universal moral principles. Second, respectful communication. If we identify a potential offense, we must seek appropriate opportunities to communicate our recognition of it and our intention to repair any harm caused. This communication should be guided by respect for the other's dignity, not by a desire for absolution or alleviation of our own guilt. Third, patience and persistence. Reconciliation does not happen instantly, especially when injuries to dignity are involved. The Kantian approach invites us to be patient in our efforts to repair and persistent in our commitment to the ideal of a community based on mutual respect. It is important to recognize, however, that not all silent wars can be resolved through these efforts. The Kantian perspective recognizes the limits of our ability to fully understand others and to control how our actions are perceived. Some ruptures in human relationships are, unfortunately, irreparable due to the complexity of the factors involved and the irreducible autonomy of each individual. In these situations, the Kantian approach invites us to accept these limits with humility and to continue to act according to universal moral principles, even in the absence of reciprocity. This is not about abandoning the ideal of relationships based on mutual respect, but about recognizing that our moral responsibility remains even when this ideal cannot be fully realized in a specific relationship. This acceptance of the limits of our capacity to repair all relationships should not, however, lead us to cynicism or despair. On the contrary, the Kantian perspective offers us resources to find moral meaning even in the most painful experiences of rejection and hostility. By maintaining our commitment to respecting the dignity of all rational beings, including those who treat us with hostility, we affirm our own moral dignity and contribute to the possibility of a more ethical human community. Every act of respect, every sincere effort at communication, every genuine attempt at reparation, even when unwelcome or unacknowledged, represents steps toward the regulative ideal of the kingdom of ends, a community of rational beings united by mutual respect and common laws. This ideal, though never fully achievable in the empirical world, serves as a moral compass that guides our actions even in the most challenging circumstances. The silent war we experience when someone suddenly begins to hate us is, therefore, not just a social discomfort to be avoided or overcome, but an opportunity for moral growth and a deepening of our understanding of the human community. By approaching these situations from a Kantian perspective, we transform a potential spiral of mutual resentment into an exercise in moral autonomy and respect for human dignity. We cannot control how others perceive or respond to us, but we can control our own moral orientation, our commitment to universalizable principles, and our willingness to acknowledge and repair unintentional harm. And in doing so, we contribute, however modestly, to the possibility of a world where silent wars are less frequent and where mutual respect and honest communication are more prevalent. This transformation in our approach to the silent war has implications that extend far beyond our immediate interpersonal relationships. As Kant argues in his political philosophy, the moral quality of our individual interactions is intrinsically linked to the possibility of a just social and political order. Every effort we make to approach interpersonal conflicts from a perspective of universality and mutual respect contributes to the gradual development of a public culture characterized by these same qualities. Conversely, every time we allow silent resentments to linger unresolved, we contribute to a culture of suspicion, hostility, and isolation. Our responses to the silent wars in our personal lives are, therefore, also political acts, with implications for the possibility of justice and peace in the broader public sphere. This political dimension of the silent war becomes particularly evident when we consider how certain types of interpersonal conflicts reflect and reinforce broader social injustices. Prejudices based on race, gender, class, and other social categories often manifest precisely through this type of undeclared hostility, this resentment that is never openly articulated, but expressed in small gestures of exclusion and disrespect. In these situations, the silent war is not simply a matter of individual misunderstandings or injuries to personal dignity, but a manifestation of systematic patterns of domination and oppression. The Kantian approach invites us to recognize this structural dimension of certain interpersonal conflicts, and to see our efforts to address them as part of a broader project of social justice and universal respect for human dignity. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the complexity of navigating these silent wars that unexpectedly arise in your relationships, know that you are not alone on this journey. The path to understanding and responding to these situations from a Kantian perspective doesn't have to be lonely or confusing. I invite you to subscribe to the channel and join this community of people who, like you, seek clarity amid the challenges of interpersonal relationships. By subscribing, you'll receive weekly reflections that transform seemingly inaccessible philosophical concepts into practical tools for navigating the complex realms of human interaction. We're not just studying philosophy. We're learning to live more wisely, respond with more integrity, and build relationships with more purpose. Click the subscribe button now, not as an obligation, but as a gift for your own relational development. And if this content brought you any clarity today about how to understand and respond to silent hostilities, please leave a like as a way of saying that we're together in this quest for more authentic and respectful relationships. Remember, understanding Kantian principles of dignity and respect is not just an academic exercise. It is a way of awakening to the possibility of transforming even our most painful conflicts into opportunities for moral growth and deeper human connection.